everyone. We are the Group 3 and we will be discussing about the basic concepts on learning, mental ability, and learning disabilities.
In the process of learning, there are two main concepts in term learning disabilities, and these are describes the learning process, explains the phenomenon about children who have average or even above average ability to learn but who experiences difficulties in learning. So what is learning? It is a process by which experience and practice result in a stable change in the learner's behavior. But permanent change of behavior is not a result of maturation or growing up through the years, but learning results from the efficient teaching that develops the learner's genetic capacity to learn to the maximum that is conducive to an effective teaching learning process. Thus, the learner manifests an understanding of content knowledge and demonstrates the ability to perform skills.
Learning can be inferred when students' performance and behavior indicate the achievement of the long-term goals that was set. Students' cognitive, affective, and psychomotor skills and competencies are enhanced by knowledge gained and performance of activities being taught every day. So in the stages of learning, there are 3 stages, but before that, let me share to you something important. Learning isn't a simple process from being not knowing to knowing state. So to understand it further, let us now discuss the 3 different stages. So the first stage is the knowing stage, wherein it has 2 sub-stages, the acquisition and reversion, and the proficiency and automaticity. So in the knowing stage, effective learning takes place when a teaching is planned very well. So here in acquisition, it is when instructional objective, goals, competencies, skills match the learning ability of the student. The teacher's ability to motivate the learner, delivery of accurate content through explicit and effective teaching methods, questioning techniques and evaluation strategies contributes in acquisition of knowledge and skills in learning areas. The conditions for effective teaching and learning are present. Student can learn and acquire skills from 0 to basic mastery of content and skills with about 85% accuracy. Using relevant instructional system and practical experiences further increases chances of achieving expected percentage of accuracy in executing tasks learned.
So the next substage is the reversion, wherein skills and content learned earlier are further strengthened to increase accuracy and mastery. Correct practice, drill, review, and similar strategies are used with immediate feedback and reinforcement. With continuous efficient and effective instruction, relevant practice, coaching, and feedback, student is gradually helped to perform the skills with at least 85% accuracy during the knowing stage. The next substage is the proficiency and automaticity. It is determined by the strength of poor learning. It is when mastery of a skill is attained, learner moves on to the substages of proficiency and automaticity. The goal is to attain fluency so that skills are automatically applied to appropriate situations in everyday life. Learner executes tasks without recalling the procedures.
So the next stage is the using stage with its substages maintenance and generalization. So in the substage maintenance, students continues using the skills acquired with proficiency and automatically over time without explicit instruction, coaching, prompt, help, or reinforcement, maintenance is achieved. Class activities allow students to continue experiencing meaningful practice of the skills in practical context. Appropriate feedback and reinforcement are given to strengthen the maintenance of skills. Learning of new skills is built on skills that are maintained, while skills that are not used will weaken even if they were learned earlier with proficiency.
Next substage is the generalization, wherein once a skill is learned proficiently, it should be available for any use in any appropriate situation. And it has goals. The first goal is the learner to recognize a new or different stimulus as a prompt to apply the learned skills. Next is to use the acquired skills in various situations, behavior, settings, and time. So the last stage is the inventing stage with its substage adaptation. So student recognizes the need to apply learned skills in situations outside of school, introduces changes or modifications in skills, and applies them to meet the new situation without help or prompts. Those skills have learned earlier, student is able to think how they can be used in a new situation without assistance or coaching or prompts. Here is an illustration on how the stages of learning takes place in the case of students with learning disabilities. Here is John, a 3rd grader with language disability who goes in a regular classroom. He is an enthusiastic learner, willing to try almost anything. He is one of those students who first responds to questions, no to similarities and content discussions, but also the first one to jump to erroneous conclusions. Without careful monitoring, he is apt to end up practicing skills incorrectly. Teacher will keep John at the acquisition stage longer to achieve accuracy of learning. Practicing will be carefully monitored to attain proficiency and automatically.
Good day everyone, I am Shola Marie Alcuya and today we are going to talk about children with learning disabilities. So first, it is going to take a look at the definition of learning disability. Learning disability is a reduced intellectual activity and difficulty with everyday activities, which will affect someone for their whole life. According to Department of Health, learning disability is a significant reduced ability to understand new or complex information, to learn new skills with a reduced ability to cope independently, which started before adulthood. The term learning disability was introduced in 1963 by Dr. Samuel Kirk. He is a well-known American special education expert. His research at Illinois was the first of its kind to study exceptional or special needs learners, and it pinpointed gaping holes in curriculum for students with learning disabilities. After 50 years, the college and the Department of Special Education looked back and looked forward at the Samuel A. Kirk Symposium, which brought together leaders in the field today to discuss Kirk's legacy and relate exciting new breakthroughs in the field of special education. People with learning disability tend to take longer to learn and may need support to develop new skills, understand complicated information, and interact with other people. The problems experienced vary from person to person. It may include aspects such as learning new things, communication, managing money, reading, writing, or personal care. Some people are born with disability, whereas others may develop one as a result of an accident or illness in childhood. Types of learning disabilities differ hugely. Someone with mild disabilities may be able to live independently with minimal support, whereas someone with severe and profound disabilities may require 24-hour care and help with performing most daily living skills. In the Philippines, special education for children with learning disabilities is only in its early years of implementation. Unlike the special education programs for children with mental retardation, giftedness and talent, visual and hearing impairments, and behavior problems that date back to 1950s, there are very few schools all over the country that have started to offer programs for children with learning disabilities. Children with learning disabilities are not children with mental retardation whose mental ability fall within below average in the normal distribution curve. They have relatively average or even above average intelligence who experience severe learning or academic problem in school, and they possess these three behavioral problems. First is inattention. A child will seem uninterested or like he or she is not listening. Second is hyperactivity. A child will seem restless and easily bored. They may have trouble sitting still or staying quiet when needed. And the last one is impulsivity. Children will do silly things to get attention, have trouble in following the rules, aggressive towards other kids, and they tend to overact to frustration, disappointments, mistakes, and criticism. In the toddler or early childhood stage, their parents may think that they are just simply naturally energetic, but later, they will notice that despite the increase in chronological age, and unlike their peers, these children fail to outgrow their inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity, and generally poor school performance. Now let us move on to the viewpoint of the American National Joint Committee on Learning Disabilities, or NJCLD. It is a national committee of representatives of organizations committed to the education and welfare of individuals with learning disabilities. This group will study the present status of identification procedures, interprofessional relationship and management of children with learning disabilities, and other issues of mental concern. And this organization issued and stated in 1989 that learning disabilities is a generic term that refers to a heterogeneous group of disorders manifested by significant difficulties in the acquisition and use of listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, and mathematical abilities. These disorders are intrinsic to the individual and presumed to be due to central nervous system dysfunction. Learning disabilities may appear across the lifespan. Problems in self-regulatory behavior, social perception, and social interaction may exist in learning disabilities but do not themselves constitute a learning disability. Although learning disabilities may occur concomitantly with other handicapping conditions, for example blindness, deafness, serious emotional disturbance, or with extrinsic influence such as cultural differences, insufficient or inappropriate instruction, learning disabilities is not the result of these conditions. A group of disorders is heterogeneous. Therefore, it is possible that one or more disorders can occur and can be experienced at the same time. But there's no two learning disabled persons are alike in mental and behavioral characteristics. A child with learning disability may have difficulties in listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, or mathematical abilities that affects his or her performance in school subjects. Children with learning disability cannot learn in the regular school subjects like his or her normal classmates. Although their mental ability is average or above average, they can meet many difficulties, especially in reading. When a child does not learn knowledge and skills in accordance with his or her potential to learn as measured by a standardized mental ability test, while his or her mental ability is appropriate to his or her chronological age, the child's performance in school shows that achievement is 2 or more years below the grade level. Thus, a 10-year-old with an IQ that is normal for a 10-year-old fails to pass the grade level although he or she has the ability to do so. And this phenomenon explained by the factor called IQ Achievement Discrepancy. It is a traditional method used to determine whether a student has a learning disability and needs of special education services. Learning disabilities is intrinsic to an individual. This means that the causes of learning disabilities can be organic, biological, genetic, or environmental. The organic and biological factors are traced to the central nervous system, particularly the brain. But mostly, the cause of learning disabilities is still unknown. Here are the 3 criteria in determining the presence of learning disabilities. The following criteria must be present when assessing children to have learning disabilities. First is a severe discrepancy between the child's potential and actual achievement. Severe discrepancy refers to one of the primary components of most states and/or local guidelines for determining if a student is eligible for special education services related to a specific learning disability. Learning disabilities is present when mental ability tests and standardized achievement test results show discrepancy between general mental ability and achievement in school. Oral expression, listening comprehension, reading comprehension, written expression, basic reading skills, mathematics calculation, and reasoning are the pieces of evidence of discrepancy score of 2 or greater than 2 in intellectual ability and achievement in one or more of the mentioned areas. Children may show learning difficulties that are minor or temporary, in which case a true learning disabilities are present. They are neither minor or temporary. The degree of discrepancy is such that special education is needed. They manifest specific and severe learning problems despite regular education efforts. Second is exclusion or absence of mental retardation, sensory impairment, and other disabilities. This criteria means that the child has significant problems that cannot be explained by mental retardation, sensory impairment like low vision, blindness, hearing impairment, emotional disturbance, or lack of opportunity to learn. Children with learning disabilities are not the children who are mentally retarded, sensory impaired, or physically disabled. We can determine if the student is experiencing learning disabilities if all the conditions for learning are present. And the last one is need for special education services. Teachers needs a unique, uncommon, and unusual quality of teaching methods and strategies in teaching children with learning disabilities. The strategies supplement the organizational and instructional procedures used with majority of the children in regular schools. This criterion is meant to keep children who have not had an opportunity to learn from being classified as learning disabled. Children with learning disabilities should progress normally as soon as they receive effective instruction at the curricular level that is appropriate to their current skills. That is why they need special education services to remediate their achievement deficiencies. That's all. Thank you and God bless.
Good day everyone, I'm Floremy B. Jumabok. So for today, I will discuss the learning and behavior characteristics of children with disabilities. So results of studies show that there are at least 99 separate characteristics of children with learning disabilities. So more than 500,000 combinations of cognitive or socio-emotional problems associated with the condition are possible. So the large number of learning characteristics makes it difficult to interpret research findings that can provide the basis for recommending effective teaching strategies. So learning disabilities may occur within the lifespan. The symptoms and characteristics can be manifested immediately after birth, during infancy, through the school years, and adulthood. So the first is reading. Possess the most difficulty among all the subject and the curriculum. It may be recalled the facets of curriculum are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Thus, reading problems are answered by deficiencies in language skills, especially the phonological skills. So these skills develop the ability to understand the rules of how various sounds go with certain letters to make up words called graphenephoneme corresponds. So the difficulty in breaking words into their components sounds result to difficulties in reading and spelling. Next one is written language. Possess several problems in one or more of the following areas. So the handwriting, spelling, composition, and writing, which is illegible and slow. So studies show that these children are not aware of the basic purpose of writing as an act of communication. So they approach writing as a test-taking task. They write shorter sentences and stories. They do not use writing strategies spontaneously. So their written work showed the lack of planning, organizing, drafting, and editing. Next one is spoken language. Possess problems on the mechanical uses of language in syntax or grammar, semantics or word meaning and phonology of the breakdown of words into their component sound and leading individual sounds composed word. So next is pragmatics or social uses of language. Possess problems on the ability to carry on a conversation. So children with learning disabilities are found to be unable to engage in the mutual give and take in carrying on conversation. So while they are often agreeable and many times they find it difficult to understand idea. So conversations are marked by long silences and ability to understand the other person's statement or questions. So they tend to answer their own questions before the other person has the chance to respond. And they also tend to make irrelevant comments that make the other person uncomfortable. Next is mathematics. Problems are recognized as second to deficiencies in reading language and spelling. Next is these children tend to fail and be retrained in grade level. So the level of academic achievement tends to decrease progressively as the grade level increases. So they find their studies to be more difficult as they go up the grades. Next is behavior problems. Remain consistent across grade levels both in school, in community, and at home. So common behavior problems are inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. So in general, next one is in general, social acceptance. It is low. Some can be popular. Now, let's proceed the perceptual motor and general coordination problem. So children with learning disabilities exhibit visual, auditory, perceptual disabilities. This problem is not lack of acuity or sharpness in vision of audition in responding to visual and auditory perceptual stimulation. The disturbance is organizing and interpreting visual and auditory stimuli. Thus, they have problems in seeing and remembering visual shapes that leads to rehearsal of B and D. For example, they have difficulties in discriminating two words that sounds alike, such as meet and knit. So, or in the following oral instruction. So, they have difficulty with physical activities that involve gross and fine motor skills. They tend to drop things as thought they are all thumbs or have two left fit. So, they have problems with attention and hyperactivity. Now, let's proceed the memory, cognitive, and metacognitive problems. So, problems in memory, cognitive, and metacognitive areas are related. So, if there is problem in memory, then there are also problem in understanding or cognition. The problem show that in difficulties in remembering assignment and appointments, so though smart, the students forget the lesson easily and also deficits in memory because they do not use memory strategies like rehearsal, categorizing, and use of mnemonics. So there are problems in cognition that covers different aspects of thinking and problem solving. So disorganized thinking occurs as a result of problem in planning, organizing their lives at home and in school. So difficulties in metacognition result from lack of awareness of skill strategies and resources of person task effectivity. So a child with a mild learning disabilities manifests deficit in cognitive functioning that show in poor academic performance in the different areas of learning. Reading, language, and mathematics are subject areas where they find the most difficulties. So the area in cognitive functioning are most affected are attention, memory, and thinking, or the executive functions of the mind. So next is attention deficit. So selective attention, or the ability to focus the relevant details of the lesson in the first requirements for learning to take place. So children who cannot pay attention cannot focus on the teaching episode for a particular subject. So the deficits in attention results in inefficiency learning or no learning at all. So students with disabilities learning do not learn despite average cognitive ability because attention deficit. So they cannot scan all the sensory stimuli such as the instructional aids used by the teacher, and instead are distracted by extra news or unrelated things. They appear to lack of the ability to sort information as shown by the wrong responses that they often give when asked questions. Lesson. So selective attention can be increased through coding and efficient selective attention strategies. Next is poor memory. So poor ability to store and retrieve information or previous learning is very evident among children with disabilities. So they find difficulty in remembering mathematics facts, spelling, words, vocabulary, meaning, content, knowledge, and information. So studies show that as verbal or written rehearsal, coding or associating a new item with a concept already in memory. Imaginary and mnemonics are either absent, immature, or inefficiently used. So to help students with attention deficits, the teacher frequently call him or her back to attention. Likewise, they provide the students with study guides and summaries of the lesson. The teachers have yet to train the students to organize his time, his lesson, and herself. So he has to increase his ability to process information, develop selective and sustained attention, use rehearsal memory strategies, and self-monitoring strategies to keep track and continue to improve his own learning. Now, let's proceed the problems in social competence. So problems in relating other people is not a characteristic of persons with learning disabilities. Rather, it is an outcome of the different social climates created by people in school, at home, and the community, and other places with one personnel with learning disabilities interact. So, scoring tests in social skills can change over time as they gain competence in social situations. Social competence may be related to social status. Thus, a disabled person may be popular, neglected, or rejected. They can have low social acceptance but can enjoy popularity, or they may have significant deficit in social skills but enjoy acceptance by their classmates and friends. One thing sure, these children can enjoy socially rewarding experiences in mainstream classroom. So now, let's proceed the last topic. Causes of learning disabilities. So the causes of learning disabilities are attributed to genetic and environmental factors. As discussed in Chapter 4, the genetic factors refers to the characteristics that are inherited through the genes, chromosomes, and deoxyribonucleic acid or DNA. So, over the years, genetic researches show that learning disabilities tend to run in families and heredity is possible causes. So studies of identical or monozygotic twins where one fertilized egg and splits and develops into two separate embryo show that when the two twins has a reading disability, and then the other twin is more likely also have a reading disability. So, in identical, twins possess the same physical and mental traits. However, research show that this is not true. In this case of fraternal or dizygotic twins, where two egg cells are fertilized and develop into two distinct embryos, or the fraternal twins carry different physical and mental traits. So that's all. Thank you and God bless.
Good morning, everyone. Another beautiful day for all of us. I am Liberty H. Delavino. Another reporter for our topic is students with learning disabilities. But today, I will discuss about the body's control system, the brain and nerves. How does it connect in our main topic, and why is it important that we study about our brain and nerves? Are you excited, everyone? Well, let's start our discussion by first analyze and know what is the brain. The brain and nervous system control our perceptions, thoughts, and voluntary actions, and also most of the body's internal processes. The brain is contained within the hard bones of the skull and cushioned against injury by surrounding membranes. And did you know that our brain is made up of just 2% of the average adult's weight but uses 20% of oxygen intake? And the brain has about 1,000 billion nerve cells. So let us talk about our brain with its three major areas. First is the cerebrum, second the cerebellum, and the third one is brain stem. Now let's talk about cerebrum. Cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is associated with conscious activities and intelligence. It is divided into two hemispheres and consists of gray matter or neuron cells and white matter or nerve fibers. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body and vice versa. So some 90% of the human population is right-handed, which means that left hemispheres of their brains are dominant. The corpus callosum joins the two hemispheres of the cerebrum. The cerebral cortex is the outer surface of the cerebrum, and it processes information from and for different parts of our body. The somatosensory strip processes sensations, while the motor strip controls the muscles. Next is cerebellum. It coordinates movement and balance. The thalamus acts as a sort of junction box, sending incoming nerve impulses to different areas of the brain. The medulla oblongata controls heart rate and breathing. The brain stem connects the brain to the spinal cord. The brain is wrapped in three separate membranes. The space between these membranes contains fluid, which allows the brain to float and thus insulates it from neck to the head. The same membranes extend over the spinal cord. 12 cranial nerves emerge from the brain itself. These subdivide to reach the eyes, nose, ears, and mouth, as well as all the muscles of the face. One of the nerves extends down independently of the spinal cord to the heart, larynx, lungs, and stomach, while another goes to muscles in the neck, where it helps to control the vocal apparatus. The average adult male brain weighs 1.4 kilograms or 3 pounds. The adult female brain weighs 1.25 kilograms or 2.75 pounds. The mass of brain tissue reaches a maximum at the age of 20 years and thereafter decreases. The spinal cord is the central pathway of the nervous system that runs through a channel within the top vertebrae of the spine. And the last one is nervous system. It is a network of nerves extends throughout our bodies, carrying sensory information to the brain and instructions from it. The brain and the spinal cord together from the central nervous system, or CNS, is the rest of the network is known as the peripheral nervous system, or PNS.
For further understanding about the brain and nerves, let us watch this video.
Today, we will talk about an organ that rules all of our body, and that is our brain. As it is the most sensitive organ, our brain is kept inside a bony covering called skull. From doing physical activity to solving logical problems, from dealing with emotions and feeling to creativity, the brain is responsible for all. Therefore, it never sleeps. Our brain can be divided into three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and brainstem. Cerebrum is the largest part of brain, which can be further divided into right and left halves, called hemisphere. Each cerebral hemisphere has 4 lobes, namely frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. Each lobe performs different functions. Cerebellum is responsible for movement and coordination. It gives you sense of balance and does prevent you from falling down. Brainstem includes midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. It controls your body's involuntary actions, like breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Brain comes under a system called nervous system. Structurally, nervous system is classified into 2 types: central nervous system, CNS, and peripheral nervous system, PNS. The central nervous system comprises of the brain and spinal cord. The spinal cord is the bridge that connects the brain to peripheral nervous system. It starts from medulla oblongata and stretches to lumbar region of the spine or vertebral column. The peripheral nervous system is a network of nerves spread across our body. Think of peripheral nervous system as a network of highway that connects the body with central nervous system. This highway has two-way traffic. Let's see how. When you hold a hot cup of coffee, sensory neurons in your hand transmit signal to brain through sensory neurons, also called afferent neurons, that the cup is hot. Your brain processes that information and send response through motor neurons, known as efferent neurons, that you must put that cup back. PNS consists of total 43 pairs of nerve, among which 12 originate in brain, named as cranial nerves, and 31 originate from spinal cord, hence called as spinal nerves. Here, you hear the word neuron. Neuron is the basic unit of nervous system. It is the nerve cell which transmit electrical signals to brain. A neuron has three parts: dendrites, soma or cell body, and axon. Dendrites serve as input device for neuron because it receives input from other nerve cells. Soma or cell body of neuron contains nucleus. Axon serve as output device from where it transmits electrical response to other neurons.
Now, let us talk about the genetic factors in learning disabilities. Learning disabilities constitutes a heterogeneous set of conditions with no single syndrome nor a single cause or etiology. Thus far, research findings cite two genetic causes of learning disabilities. These are brain damage and biochemical imbalance. So, this time let us know what is brain damage. It is an increasing consensus attributes learning disabilities to neurological dysfunction or central nervous system pathology. The models of the causes of learning disabilities state that the condition can be: A is hereditary or indicating the presence in the genetic makeup of certain inherited diseases or disorders that damage the brain. B is innate or resulting from biological influences during the period of conception or pregnancy. And letter C is congenital or constitutional, indicating that biological influences may have originated during the process of gestation or development in the prenatal or before birth, perinatal during birth, or postnatal after birth periods of development. Some individuals with learning disabilities show definite signs of brain damage, which may well be the cause of their learning problems. In recent years, neurologists and other professionals use advanced technology to assess brain activities more accurately. Some of the new procedures are letter A, electroencephalogram or EEG. This is a graphic measure and recording of the brain's electrical impulses. The EEG is a digitally computerized recording and analysis of the brain waves. Many students with learning disabilities have abnormal brain waves as shown by the encephalograph that records the brain's electrical impulses. And next one is computerized tomographic scans, or what we call a CT scan. This is a neuroimaging technique whereby x-rays of the brain are compiled by a computer to produce an overall picture of the brain. The CT scans enable the neurologist to look at the overlying pathology or physical condition of the brain. The next one is magnetic resonance imaging or MRI. This is a neuroimaging technique whereby radio waves are used to produce cross-sectional images of the brain. CT scans and MRI results show that the brains of those with learning disabilities suffered from a disruption in the development of the neural cells during the early months of pregnancy. This means that the neurons in the brain area did not develop normally. The next genetic factors of learning disabilities is biochemical imbalance. And some researchers claim that biochemical disturbances in a child's body cause learning disabilities. A study in 1975 by Feingold suggested that artificial food colors, flavors, preservatives, salicylates, and megavitamins in many of the foods that children eat can cause learning disabilities and hyperactivity. But a comprehensive review of diet-related studies concluded that very little pieces of evidence supported that statement. So, although it is possible or even probable that biochemistry may affect a child's behavior and learning in the classroom, no scientific evidence exists today to reveal the nature or extent of that influence. The third one is environmental factors. The environmental factors are difficult to study. There are pieces of evidence that show poverty, malnutrition, and inadequate learning experiences that include poor teaching and lack of instructional materials are as cause of environmental disadvantage that make children prone to learning problems. There are three types of environmental influences believed to be related to children's learning problems, and these are number one, environmental disturbance. And many children with learning problems have behavioral disorders as well. Whether one causes the other or whether both are caused by some other factors remains uncertain. Number two is lack of motivation. It is difficult to identify reinforcing activities for some students with learning disabilities. It is possible that they may not simply be interested in any of the things those other children like. And number 3 is poor instruction. Although children are able to learn in spite of poor teaching and inadequate strategies, other children are less fortunate. Some of them have experienced poor instruction in the early grades, are not able to catch up with their peers. So now let's talk about the assessment of learning disabilities. Learning disabilities is a complex condition, and therefore a battery of 3 to 5 tests is used to identify students who may have learning disabilities. These are norm reference tests, process tests, informal reading inventories, criterion reference tests, and direct daily measurement of learning. The National Achievement Test, the Regional Assessment Test, and the School-Based Achievement Test are examples of norm reference tests. The assessment tests are all designed to measure how many of the skills in each learning area, English, Filipino, mathematics, science, and makabayan, have been learned or mastered. Students with learning disabilities manifest deficits in the expected number of skills for mastery in a particular grade level. One area of difficulty that students with learning disabilities experience is in processing information. The specific perceptual problems are in visual perception, auditory perception, and visual motor coordination. Criterion reference tests in specific subjects such as reading, language, and mathematics are used to determine the mastery level of a predetermined criterion that the students should be capable of achieving. The specific skills already learned and identified, as well as those that have yet to be mastered. A widely used American criterion reference test is the Brigance Diagnostic Inventory of Basic Skills, or Brigance 1983. Most school divisions have developed their own reading tests and inventories to determine the student's reading ability. An informal reading inventory usually consists of a series of progressively more difficult sentences and paragraphs for oral reading. The student's mistake in reading skills are recorded, particularly in pronunciation of vowels and consonants, omissions, reversals, substitutions, and comprehension. A useful method of determining a student's performance in learning a particular skill is through direct daily measurement of his or her progress in learning the skill. For example, in a mathematics lesson, the teacher observes and records the correct rate of number of facts stated or written correctly per minute, the error rate or how many times the student gives wrong responses, and the percentage of correct answers. Direct daily measurement of the mastery of the skill being taught informs the teacher about the deficit in learning and allows him or her to make the necessary adjustments in the lesson. Specialists recommend that children regular classes who have learning disabilities be identified as early as possible through appropriate assessment procedures. Then, an individualized educational plan or IEP can be prepared based on the learning and behavioral characteristics found in the assessment results. So, a special education teacher should also assist the regular teacher in teaching children with learning disabilities. The studies show that many of their learning problems can be lessened through direct and systematic instruction. Behavior modification techniques can decrease their undesirable behavior of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. In the absence of qualified school psychologists or guidance counselors, the school principal can initiate a screening program to locate these children in the regular classes. Inquiries on assessment and early intervention can be addressed to the Department of Education, Bureau of Elementary Education, as a Special Education Division. Early location, assessment, and identification of these children has the potential to prevent or reduce the occurrence of future learning problems. Special education experts highly recommend the use of the diagnostic prescriptive evaluation approach in teaching children with learning disabilities as well as those with mental retardation. Here, the results of assessment are used directly to draw up an individualized education plan. The long-term annual goals that the student can achieve are identified. Then the short-term quarterly objectives are prescribed. Monthly, weekly, and daily instructional plans are written to achieve the preset goals and objectives of teaching. Formative and summative evaluation procedures are employed to track the mastery of the skills. Attention Deficit Disorder, or ADD, and Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, also known as ADHD. Attention Deficit Disorder and Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder are conditions in which children exhibit significant differences in the ability to pay attention and to engage in active work compared to their normal peers. These children show lack of control in saying things, cannot wait for their turn, and often engage in dangerous activities. ADD and ADHD are common characteristics of children with learning disabilities. There is attention deficit when the child is not able to attend to a task expected of his or her age and grade level. And hyperactivity is present when the child engages in high rates of purposeless movement. And impulsivity is displayed through inappropriate behavior. The essential feature of ADD or ADHD is a persistent pattern of a combination of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity that is more frequent and severe, maladaptive, and inconsistent with the development level of the child. Let us talk about the ADD or ADHD iceberg. It is a complex condition. The condition may range from mild, moderate, severe to profound, and may exist together with other disabilities. While there are observable symptoms and characteristics, many of the signs are not visible. That is why it is called ADD or ADHD iceberg, compared to an iceberg where only 1/8 can be seen in the surface of the ocean. Try to imagine an iceberg that only 1/8 can be seen in the surface of the ocean. Most of the symptoms and characteristics of ADD or ADHD are not observable and remain hidden in the person's behavior. So for further understanding about these disabilities or ADD and ADHD, I have prepared a short video for us to understand and learn more about this disorder.
ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is an innate attention deficit disorder. Children who have ADHD often have problems with paying attention for an extended period of time. They are often unable to focus long on a command to work. However, when they are interested, they can keep focused. They tend to move continuously and are known to be impulsive, not thinking before doing something. Although ADHD is often diagnosed and is said to occur in children more frequently, adults also have the tendency to suffer from the disorder. The exact cause of ADHD is unknown, but there are 3 factors related to its occurrence. They are heredity. Children with a parent with ADD or ADHD have an increased chance of getting ADD or ADHD too. A neurobiological disorder in the brain that is caused by chemical imbalances inside the brain with neurotransmitters, and environmental influences. ADHD seems to be more commonly diagnosed nowadays because society generally is ADHD unfriendly. ADHD is often thought to be the same as ADD, or attention deficit disorder. Although both ADD and ADHD are an attention deficit disorder, it is not exactly the same, and ADD is a subtype of ADHD. People with ADHD are known to show hyperactivity and impulsivity, while somebody with ADD has a predominantly inattentive behavior. People with ADD have little or no symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity, and with predominant complaints of inattention, easy distractibility, disorganization, procrastination, and forgetfulness. People with ADD are also likely to accept and internalize the continuous negative feedback, creating a great tendency for low self-esteem, and will often lead to the development of secondary psychological problems that includes anxiety disorders, sexual and mood disorders, and substance abuse. Generally, symptoms of ADHD are inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity, mental high sensitivity, chronic forgetfulness, anxiety, low self-esteem, anger management issues, an increased risk of addiction, smoking, drugs, alcohol, and gambling addiction, procrastination, mood swings, depression. Symptoms of ADHD may decrease with increasing age. ADHD may also entail positive qualities such as a high social intelligence, a great empathy and sensitivity, exceptional ability to see certain things in detail. They are often very caring towards others, and they often excel in talent in a certain field, such as music. There is no cure for ADHD. However, treatment can help a person feel less affected by the symptoms of ADHD. The symptoms of ADHD can be controlled by medication, behavioral management therapy, and involvement of parents and teachers. Medications called stimulants are used to control hyperactivity, impulsivity, and to increase attention span. Some commonly used stimulants for ADHD are methylphenidate and dexamphetamine. Non-stimulants are also a medication option for ADHD, like atomoxetine. Guidance includes treatment modalities that focus on behavior modification, counseling, special education, and social skills training. For more information about ADHD and possible treatments, you should contact your general practitioner.
What many teachers don't know about ADHD. Your child's ADHD is an iceberg. According to Chris A. Ziegler-Dendy, just 10% of its complex symptoms are visible to the naked eye. Most teachers recognize hallmark signs like hyperactivity, impulsivity, inattention, but its lesser-known invisible challenges are easy to blame on laziness or disobedience. Use this guide to explain beneath-the-surface ADHD attributes that are commonly misunderstood at school. 1. Developmental delays. Kids with ADHD mature at a slower pace. Their brain development can lag 2 to 3 years behind their peers. A 15-year-old with ADHD may act like a 12-year-old socially and emotionally. 2. Impaired executive functioning. Executive functions help kids plan, prioritize, and execute daily tasks. When they are weak, students have trouble with remembering homework or the rules, keeping track of due dates, getting started on boring tasks, sticking with difficult projects, and retrieving facts or information. 3. Emotional dysregulation. ADHD impairs a child's ability to regulate feelings, anger, anxiety, or sadness. Students with ADHD may have overblown reactions to setbacks that seem small, and then struggle to calm down. 4. Coexisting conditions. Roughly half of all students with ADHD also have a second condition, like a learning disability, anxiety, depression, or oppositional defiant disorder. The first step towards greater learning is a comprehensive diagnosis and more complete understanding.
Before this video presentation ends, here are some takeaways or parting words from our group that we want to share with all of you. Learning disabilities is very crucial and a struggling part for other children who has this kind of disabilities. Some of them, because of the lack of support from the society, sometimes makes them more vulnerable and feel insignificant and neglected by the society and even from their peers. And after we have studied this topic, the students with learning disabilities, as a future educator, we realize that even if we have nothing or even if we are less fortunate than everybody else, still we can be a hero for some students with learning disabilities if we just know and understand their situation better and if we are wholeheartedly helping them to cope with their struggles in learning and even in their life. Remember, as a future educators, we are not just only there to teach, we are there also to guide them, to be a tool for them to reach their goals and make their dreams come true. We hope by learning this foundation of special education, we are more understanding, observant, and more careful with our words, actions, and feelings towards them who has learning disabilities, so that together we can help them and encourage them to continue to reach their dreams and goals in life in spite of their disabilities and situations in life. Once again, thank you very much for watching and have a great day for all of us.